Welcome back, everybody. Today we have the NPR podcast. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things, but we're going to start off with introductions. So my name is Carlos, and we have with us
Emma Corcoran.
And Yusta Rothenbach.
Tyler Harnick.
And Notion.
And Jacob Banger.
Yeah, and we're going to be discussing the topics of misinformation and politics. So Tyler was going to start us off with technology. What are your thoughts on technology, Tyler?
All right, I just want to go over a little bit of contextualist view of technology. So I'm going to start out with a quote from Stoudemire from 1985. So think about it as the internal design of specific technology as dynamically interacting with a complex of economic, political, and cultural factors. So this emphasizes the particularities of social and historical conditions in which different technologies have developed. In doing so, they have avoided the excessively deterministic implications of so many internal histories. Like, I want to give an example of memes, right? So we all see memes as quite funny and hilarious, but when it comes back to the 1920s and we are having Nazi parties putting out whatever boards of, hey, if you're not respecting you're not following Jews, then you're not with us. And then we have United States putting out like things like carpool signs. So we all know that we need to support our country and help out the war. Now we have memes that kind of mock society, mock certain things. So there's different approaches that we can take to technology and how we've been implementing it into our various societies. Depending on what country you're from, this can mean many different things. Depending on what age you are, as a toddler, and someone just hands you an iPad, you don't know what you're doing with that technology. When you're a teenager and you're full of hormones and you're just ranting on Facebook, you don't know the future consequences that will have. When you're an adult and you're just searching the internet for whatever, you somewhat have an idea of what technology is really doing, but we still have people that click on I agree to whatever terms. So do we really know what we're getting ourselves into?
I think that's great thinking. I'd like to go back to the reasons why we have memes and why they're so important and the progress of technology. So before we had, of course, the printing press. It was the largest form of mass media that we could spread, which was just on text. Then the radio was invented and we involved another sense. We were able to hear the information. And finally, the TV, which was finally I think the final evolution of the most senses we were able to see. We can see, hear, and visualize what we were seeing. And now with technology, there has been a big change in which corporations take all of these things into mind, and they specifically point each other out by what you view, what you intake, what you like to see, what you like to hear, what your tastes are. And I think what Tyler said about information and specifically technology is a great point. So I think that leads us into our next discussion, where technology is now. We're past the printing press, and right now we're in a technology era of social media. So we would like to discuss next what social media and the implications of social media on society, more specifically our politics, because that's what we have to deal with today.
I kind of want to go in here with a study done by Sage Journals. They basically found that the digital peddling of fake news is influential to persuasive political participation. Social media, with its instantaneous and widespread usage, has been exploited by anonymous political influencers who have fabricated and basically created communities with unverified and false information. With that, there's a lot of dangers to misinformation and fake media. Basically, there's also, it kind of ties into intelligence and government and things like that, but a lot of decisions made by politicians can have a lot of misinformation and can have a lot of bad consequences. There's a post by the Washington Post fact checker. It tallied about 16,000 false, misleading statements by Trump when he was president for the 3 years in office. Anyone wants to tie into that?
I think that kind of has to tie into a study that I found on the PBS NewsHour, actually. Social media is great and it can, let people know what's going on everywhere in the world at all times. But they said that in a study done, they said that 59% of Americans say that it's hard to identify false information, which can intentionally mislead and cause inaccurate stories to be portrayed as the truth, which is like, it makes us think about not only about what we see on the media, but what we see just every single day in general. Like, we don't necessarily know what's real and fake, and it's becoming harder and harder with everybody being able to just release whatever they want to out into the world. And wanted to actually tie this in as well, but a study from the Massachusetts Institute for Technology said that misinformation moved 6 times faster than the truth on Twitter. So it's like somebody spreads something that's false and then everybody hears about it and it's hard to decipher.
Who is the one that decides what is true or false? Like, I know there's some objective truth, like you can't say there's 2 penguins in Arizona when there's none. But in social media, who is in charge of fact checking everything? Who is the one in charge of silencing the ones that are not factual? Is that the responsibility of the platform itself or the responsibility of the user to know what is real and fake? Because the uneducated population of America won't be able to tell that apart. So is it the responsibility of the platform to be the ones to tell the users what is real and what is fake?
There should be governmental oversight, in my opinion, just because what Twitter can do and like Facebook can do as a corporation, their effects on like silencing US politicians is more than any other corporation had in the history of the world, in my opinion. Because before you had these big industries that could lobby politicians, but now they could straight up remove their ability to speak into the public discourse.
I can absolutely agree with that opinion as well. I think that's a great intervention that should be done, because as of right now, it's pretty much just a free kind of portal for people to just post information on. And it's really easy for people to get caught up in these confirmation bias type scenarios. And this is what President Trump was clinging on to during the election conspiracy when he was promoting the disinformation around it. I personally saw that from some people around me as well, and it was very alarming for me to see. So I do agree that the government should be able to step in and be able to determine what is misinformation and what is not. That way we're not having so much controversy and confusion as to what we're actually seeing.
But that just brings it back to catch-22 of the Orwellian state, where the government just controls all information. They're the people who could decide what gets posted and what's true on social media. So it's like a balancing act.
But then we take it to a whole nother level, and let's say we do get our government involved. Now, do we turn into China? Does all of our platforms have to be regulated, constructed? We can't use certain medias anymore. Our speech is regulated. Our politicians, do they get to do whatever they want? How would this lead into us using social media?
I personally,
sorry,
sorry, please.
No, you go.
Okay, I personally don't think the government should be involved with what is right and what is wrong on social media because that can lead to a lot of problems. Legislation will be passed down, I'm sure, if a bill like that is passed on what is right and what is wrong. What are the boundaries that the government is allowed to intake? Is someone allowed to post a meme that is clearly fake? Will the government take that down? And so on. But I think an even more concerning thing is the monopolization of, say, school education. Pearson is basically a monopoly over all of the education we have, and they're very biased. They have a bias, and they don't show history as it truly is. So, is the government? I don't think has the same intentions as the people do. Democracy is supposed to be the people, but in actuality, democracy there's a separation between the people and the government. So I think if the government controls social media, there will be a separation between what the people want to spread and what the government wants people to see.
Well, we could take the libertarian ideals of no interference, where the government interferes to not interfere. Because when Trump's Twitter account got banned, his official like head of state one, they couldn't remove that because that's protected under U.S. law that their official head of state social medias can't be touched, but his personal one can. What I suggest is that applying for all political politicians, no matter like what side of the spectrum they on, protection over their own personal media as well, that they can't be silenced whatsoever.
I mean, it's our First Amendment right, you know. As Americans, we have the right to pretty much say whatever we want to say, whether that be in person or on social media behind a screen. I think it's our job as individual people to like realize that with every piece of information that we see, off the top of our head, we're probably not just going to be able to decipher whether it's fake or real. We need to kind of fact check everything for ourselves, which is unfortunate because it's hard to do that because we see so much different like media and data every single day just from being on our phones, from being on our computers. But again, like no one's going to tell us just straight off that that's fake, that's not real. So we kind of have to figure that out for ourselves. And that kind of just creates a bias, which isn't great because some people think that's real, some people think that's fake, and they can find information to support it or reject it. And it can become a very big controversy over every single topic.
Yeah, I think it's really good to always stay a little skeptic, but not enough to where it drives you insane. So there's plenty of information out there, and you can learn basically anything on the internet. But at a certain point, you have to take it upon yourself as an individual to do your research, to look into this, to ask questions, because we still have people that are drinking bleach because someone said it gets rid of coronavirus on the internet. It's tragic, but it happens because I don't want to say Darwinism, but we have to teach individuals that you need to do your research and be a little bit skeptic about any information you come across before spreading it out as objective truth.
I absolutely agree with that statement. And I do agree also that we should, as Americans, be able to have the right for free speech, free thought, all of those things, absolutely for sure. But one of the things that we come across is that I think a lot of people are just very quick to make judgments about things. And you made a really good point that we need to always be kind of skeptical when we're looking at something, because what we may think is the truth might not actually be the truth long term. And it might just be what we're seeing right now. And over time, if you start seeing like data and collecting data for yourself, you might be able to find more information on that stuff. And that's where a lot of people who tend to be more educated and tend to track their data more can see what kind of works for them. And instead of it being like, this is the absolute truth, which is very much what the media kind of tends to play at, no matter what the angle we're trying to be at, it should be like, hey, this is what we found and we're seeing this is working, rather than, hey, this is what is, and this is a stagnant thing. Because from what we can tell, it's a dynamic thing that's always growing and changing, and there's not really one absolute truth.
Makes it hard too, though, because although there isn't a lot of fact checking, but there are people who don't want to hold back the truth that do get placed on like gag orders. So I think that's kind of interesting and plays an interesting part into the information that we also might not be receiving.
And then what about things like conspiracy theories, information that we don't know is the truth, but maybe there's some crumbs here and there?
Well, conspiracies are my specialty because I love reading conspiracies because some of them are really, really funny. Like one that's really funny is the ancient tree theory that trees aren't real. We never had trees. They're like the limbs of the earth, like organically the limbs of the earth. And there's stuff like the hollow earth theory, where the entire middle of the earth is hollow, King Kong lives there and stuff. But recently I've noticed that there's a push more from these more outlandish conspiracies towards political conspiracies. And a lot of that has to do with like a conceited effort from whoever, whatever, foreign agents, whatever you call them, like people who want to use conspiracies for political movements. QAnon being the biggest one, of course, that everyone knows about. And if you look at the psychology on conspiracies, if you look at Stanley Milgram's experiments, if you've heard of him, he's the person who did all these experiments on psychology and like people listening to authority figures. Famously, he did one where he made somebody look at the sky for a minute straight and see how many other people started looking at the sky with him. When there was one person looking at the sky, it was like 4% of people looked at the sky. But as more people started looking at the sky, exponentially, everyone around just started looking at the sky as well, which just makes it the group conformity fact, which is what conspiracies are based on. The fact that, oh, other people believe this, I should too, to fit in with the group.
Right. It's called intersubjectivity. Well, intersubjective. So think of objective as absolute truth, subjective as, well, not the truth, and intersubjective, think about it like religion. It's could be true, could not be, but since everyone is in on it, everyone believes, it's technically their truth. So it's intersubjective. Same with conspiracy theories.
I think one big problem with conspiracy theories is that us speaking as college students, we have the ability to think and be skeptical of everything. We can see the two sides to the coin. But the less educated portion of America, or the ones that are unable to access this education, they I know from personal experience visiting these people and living around them my whole life, they take it for granted. What they see on the news is their truth. And if anyone tells them otherwise, it's not the truth. So everyone lives by their own truth. And I think that if the government, back to what the government controlling the social media thing, if it's a clear and present danger, I think it should be silenced. However, I think that's the only case it should be silenced, and anything else should be the First Amendment and should be allowed to be spoken about.
Well, that's also a bit extreme. You think about all the conspiracies in history that haven't proven true, such as all the ones with CIA, MK Ultra, syphilis experiment, and the when they overthrew all the Latin American governments, and then somebody 30 years later came out and said, I was with the CIA, this is what we did. And it turned out the conspiracies were all true. So the government easily, in the interest of like national safety, could say, oh, this is an outlandish conspiracy. You would never do that. But it could still be true. So who can determine which conspiracy is dangerous and like outlandish and which one's true?
Yeah, I think it's, it's a back and forth because, people who aren't necessarily in higher power make up conspiracies that get other people to believe them. And then if it goes far enough, the president will believe it as well. Like, Trump going around and saying that after the election that everything was rigged and that he went after so many states for having rigged elections, saying the ballots were off, saying that the count was off, and blah, 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 blah. And it just caused a lot of like rampage around the country. And it was very obviously fake. And it did make a lot of people think, though, like, is our voter system flawed? Like, I mean, I think it is, but is our voter system flawed in terms of like the count and like who's going to get elected? And it's just, I don't know, it can cause a lot of violence and a lot of plots that spring from different conspiracies. And I think that Trump was kind of like a big player in 2016 through 2020, just making up stuff or just saying stuff just to get a reaction out of people and get them to be doing stuff that wasn't necessarily good, like conspiracies rooting Qanon or lockdown measures or like propaganda about Antifa. It became a bad mix because nobody was controlling what he was saying. So I wonder if, like, do we need to censor the people in higher power?
Twitter has already done so.
Just Twitter, though, and it wasn't for a very, very long time. So it makes us think, like, does this behavior just get to go on unbothered?
I think
go on.
Okay. I think that our voter system is inherently flawed because of it relies on humans, and humans are flawed. They are biased, and the perspectives can be changed. I think the reason why Trump was able to persuade so many people is because of his background. He came as a businessman. He sells an idea, he pitches an idea, even though the actual product is not what he sells. And in doing so, he was able to see that the voter system was flawed because he was able to persuade so many people by pitching it as a businessman. He told them the truth they wanted to hear, and they all believed him. And then he used that mob mentality to turn things in his favor. And that's what he did most of his career. Because if you see that Trump supporters, they don't idealize him as a president. They almost idealize him as a god. And I think that's intentional. Period.
It's interesting what you said about the voter system and it being flawed, because that's also what a lot of the Bolsheviks said back in the early 1900s, that democracy would never work because it's too reliant on the average citizen, which would be what they saw to be too uneducated and not caring enough about the affairs of the state for them to vote. And that argument could be applied too for information a lot of times. That, if you censor the people in power, then you're just giving the citizens the ability to think and do whatever they want. And then who knows what could be true.
But it's hard because you say that, but then it's how do we know that anything is true necessarily, whether it comes from a person of higher power, whether it comes from a news source we like or dislike, or whether it comes from like our friends and family or a random social media post. It's really hard to decipher sometimes because everything is kind of just thrown on top of each other. And when it comes out of the mouth of people who are in higher power, you're more likely to believe it if it's someone that you feel like pertains to your views or you feel like is doing the right thing, but they could just be lying. So it kind of puts a lot of mistrust in everything, because it's kind of like, I kind of compare it to like when your mother or father is just like, it's like this because I told you so, like, because I told you so, you know? It doesn't really give much of a backup. It's kind of just like, this is how it is. You have to believe me because I'm your mother. Same way with like people in higher power, I kind of feel like.
Yeah, I just want to state, like, overall, I feel like we are too primitive to have the blessing of technology and social media to give each other all this information in seconds throughout the entire world. I feel like we haven't learned to use it yet, or to even communicate with each other on a truth by truth basis.
I think Emma made a really good point there about how can we really know who to trust as well. I think a lot of us in society, like we look up to people. We all have people that we would say are so-called like idols that we would like to be like. So what happens is we tend to put these people on a pedestal because they're somebody we want to be like. And we assume just from our own bias that they must know everything and that they're a perfect person. But in reality, when we look at it logically, they're just human beings, just like all the rest of us. And just because they say something doesn't mean it is. And we have to be able to logically look at that and break it down and take what we need from it and figure out what our own truth is.
Are you guys familiar with the work of Sartre and bad faith of logic? Basically, he was a philosopher that thought that oh, the world is too focused on logic right now, and it's too imposing right now that everything has to be rational for it to be true. And then he goes into this like philosophical spiel about how the suppression of logic oppresses every other form of maybe it's something that's not subjectively true. So there's the argument about if something really is true or not has been going on for like hundreds of years with philosophers, and I don't think anyone's going to get to the bottom of it anytime soon.
I kind of want to tie into like what we're talking about and like truth and everything. I just kind of want to point out, because we have a big sector in our government, and that's intelligence, that works on finding the truth for us and the information needed for policymakers and the president to make decisions. And, you know, they're doing a lot of fact checking and trying to, you know, keep relevance and make sure that everything that they're providing to the officials, policymakers, president isn't going to be true. But then our policymakers and president are completely ignoring everything that's given to them by intelligence, and then blaming them for a lot of decisions that are made later on, that they may have made. So, and then we're feeding off of that and seeing the backlash of them not paying attention to intelligence and then giving them true information, but then the government telling everybody and the public that intelligence is always giving them fake news and misinformation. So I think that's kind of...
Us as a public also can't really tell if what intelligence is giving to the public is true at all, because you can just go look at the list of conspiracies CIA has done. And, well, they hit it at the start, but it's only like 30 years later we realized that, wow, okay, that's what really happened.
I think the intelligence given to the public is a little bit iffy, but the intelligence from the public given to public corporations, that's a subject that I would like to touch upon personally. The mass collection of data, of our data. When we click the terms and agreements, we agree to this mass collection of data, although we might not read the fine print. And they personally select ads in their algorithms to market towards us. And depending on the type of person, it'll work or it won't. If you market towards a child, then you most likely will sell your item. So is it moral to have this mass collection of data on every single person and to market to them specifically?
Well, this just goes back to Snowden debate, right? He warned us all that what the NSA was doing to collect all American data, and most people just don't care. Like, you know, when you log on to Facebook, you log on to Snapchat, you log on Instagram, they're tracking literally everything you're doing. Like, it's, you guys all have Snapchat maps, right? It's kind of crazy. Like, they know where you are, where your friends are, where you're going to be, and they could kind of like sell this data to advertisers, to bigger corporations, and they do. But we don't care because whatever, it's convenient to us. We want to use Snapchat. So it's just choice of the consumer is more important than the privacy.
It's a lot of manipulation, I think. You know, like maybe we don't really see it that much, but because like you said, we don't really care that much. If we cared that much, we wouldn't have the social media platforms. We wouldn't be looking on all these different websites, and we'd be getting angry when we saw that what we were looking at was pertaining to what we're interested in, because we'd be like, oh, they're watching us. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of just the way things are right now, and I'm not really sure how much we can change them.
I think it's more so that we find it convenient. We don't really care as much because it's convenient. It's easy to not read the terms of agreement. It's easy to be talking about pancakes, walking past someone else's phone, and somehow it picks up on it, and now you get an ad of buttermilk pancakes. You're like, huh? Oh, cool. It doesn't matter to us. We just think it's very convenient, very easy, fast. I think it's more so our society and how we base our practices. We want fast, easy, and efficient, and we're going to let these companies basically control us just because it's easier.
At what point does invasion of privacy outweigh convenience? Because I know that Google, they were on trial and they asked them, the CEO of Google, if they read our personal emails that we sent. He said that they don't, but they can. They gather every single email we send out and they compile it into one data booklet under our name, and they can sell that information to other people. And if they ever need to access it, they have the power to do so. I personally don't want my emails searched through, but there's nothing I can do because that's the most convenient and widely used platform for sending emails, and there is no competitor. It's almost as if it were a monopoly by corporations.
Yes, Snowden told us that all our emails are actually being recorded in the NSA server for the government's access if they needed to. And he told the world, and nobody really cared because, okay, I can't use Google anymore. I can't use Google Maps, the Google like ecosystem, whatever. It's just a battle of convenience again.
I mean, people can compile your data, but then, yeah, they have your data, but they can also lie about it. Like if you think about in the 2016 election when Hillary's emails were released and like, you know, Pizzagate happened and that guy thought that Hillary was harboring children under a pizza place. And he brought a huge gun to try to go save the children. Like people, I don't know, people believe what they want to believe. Like nobody, I don't know. It's just it's a mess. All in all, misinformation around politics and around everything can be really, really, really toxic. I think it's important that we get to see everything that the media and the world has to offer. Like it's great to be able to see everything that's happening in the world, whether it's false or real, but we just have to be careful and, you know, be aware of what we're seeing and what's real and fake, because it's hard to decipher. We can't let other people do it for us. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there, but thank you everybody for coming and talking, and great conversation. So
Great, good conversation, everybody.